As a business leader, you've got to be thinking about the future as you decide how are you going to allocate capital, how are you going to allocate human resources, how are you going to assess risks and opportunities, and you've got to have a view of the future to be able to make those types of determinations. I think there's really three big trends that are going to affect our business over the next 10 to 20 years. One, what's happening with global demographics. You know, how are the populations around the world aging, forming households, generating wealth, accumulating wealth? I think that's probably the biggest factor whenever you're looking at the future of demographics. Number two is supply and demand. Macroeconomics around commodities. I think the biggest factor in there will probably be energy. What's happening in the world around extraction, production, utilization, and the costs associated with that, and carbon. I think that's a huge trend that's going to affect the world. And number three are capital flows. How will capital flow between developed nations and developing nations? I think you're going to see just an incredible continued growth in the emerging markets as we go into globalization. How will capital flow into the emerging markets, and how will capital be priced in the developed markets? So I think those are three of the biggest trends that we look at when we're trying to evaluate our business opportunities. If you look at GE today and you talk about where we're investing for the long term, it's in our infrastructure business. It's in aviation, it's in energy, it's in oil and gas, production, exploration, extraction, distribution, it's in transportation, and it's in healthcare. And I think it varies by business what the cycle is. But today, I mean, we're making investments in our aircraft engine business for a next generation narrow body engine that probably won't even go into production for the next 5 or 6 years. And we're investing several $100 million today because we know that when the competition comes for that product, we're going to have the technology that's ready. And we've got to continue to advance the technology to be able to meet the fuel demands and the efficiency demands and the environmental demands that'll be required in the world in 5 or 6 or 7 years. So we have a very long horizon. We've got a lot of great technologies we're investing in, and it's about capital allocation based on what future growth is going to be and what will those returns be when we think about the future for investments. I think it'd be great if students had a better framework for evaluating the future. Whatever case someone picks, it's probably not going to be exactly right. But having scenarios and being able to do planning around resource allocation, if you have an upside case, here are the types of trends and factors that would drive it. You have a base case, you may have a downside case. It'll enable them to think through the alternatives that might affect your business and be better prepared to deal with those uncertainties when they arise. And I think if people had a little bit more critical thinking, they were a little more externally focused, they were driven more by global demographics, supply-demand factors, and they had a framework that enabled them to have alternatives ready in the event the scenario doesn't unfold exactly as they originally thought. That critical thinking, that framework around being able to think about different scenarios and being able to react to different uncertainties and externalities that come at you, I think is highly valued in today's business world.